And welcome into Poke the Bear, episode 116. That is Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. Conor, how you doing?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. We are less than a week away now from regular season action. Bruins Caps. Only one preseason game left, and then it's on to the real thing. But we saw on Wednesday night, like, even though it was a preseason game, Bruins Rangers still pretty good. Like, not a bad game. Some exciting stuff for a preseason game. So it hasn't all been boring in the preseason, except for that Devils game, which was just, if you missed a game, I hope it was that one, because that was quite a snooze fest. But anyways, Thursday, which is the day we're recording, is the big cuts day. It's the big, when the guys are moving from Boston to Providence, and Bruins made some news on Thursday they sent down some notable ones. Johnny Beecher, Fabian Lysell, which again, don't panic. It's okay. Take some time to develop. But the one that I think had a lot of people scratching their heads was Marc McLaughlin sent down to Providence, which kind of came out of nowhere. It felt like, just given that he'd been playing so well in the preseason, looked like he had a spot on that fourth line. Now he's headed to Providence. What's your take of this?
Yeah, definitely surprising, I think, when you just look at the level of production he put forth during the preseason. Now, if you told me once camp started that McLaughlin was going to be a guy that's going to be the outside looking in, I would have believed it, right? You look at a guy who flashed last year, but he doesn't have to go through waivers to go into Providence. Okay, guys like Steen or what have you are going to have the first look. But then by the time you go through, 3 or 4 preseason games, see how McLaughlin played, I thought the writing was kind of on the wall once they sent Steen through waivers down to Providence. Like, all right, McLaughlin has a spot locked up, because again, you look at just the number of guys that have been vying for those fourth line minutes. I think McLaughlin's been the most consistent guy among that group in terms of not just the tangible production of 4 points in 4 games. His details have been good. Battles along the boards have been good. You just look at everything that was working in his favor. Plus, you add the fact that the Bruins have said time and time again since Cassidy's firing that this is a time to add more youth to the lineup. Seems like this would be the perfect situation, right? A guy that does well in camp, leapfrogs a couple of other guys on the depth chart and settles into wouldn't say low risk, but it's not like he's falling into a top 6 spot. Like, he eases into the lineup.
It's not Lysell.
He eases into the lineup on the fourth line and builds his game up from there. Seems to be a good way to, a good tip of the cap for a young player that proved his worth in the preseason. But here we are where you're looking at, again, there's a few days before we find out what the actual starting lineup will be on October 12th. But look at guys like Foligno up in the top line, Nosek. It's just tough. Like, I understand like the waivers and how that impacts it, but when you look at just the Bruins and their willingness to add younger players to the mix and reward them, this one seemed like kind of a layup. So I think McLaughlin will probably be playing quite a few games up with Boston this year, but still to not kind of get that, that carrot dangled in front of him and have it get ripped away. It's just a tough hit for a guy that really proved, I think, a lot of people wrong so far during camp.
I just think it sends a weird message, as you said, where like they wanted this to, as you said, to be more open to younger players. And you have McLaughlin, who's been terrific, fits the spot, would be a great addition to that fourth line. And he's going to be playing the beginning of the season in Providence. Now, it wouldn't surprise me, by the way, if Foligno doesn't work out, or for some reason Nosek doesn't work out, and suddenly McLaughlin's back up. I don't like, or an injury or something like that. Like, I think that absolutely is going to happen. But I wonder if Bruce Cassidy's looking at this from Vegas, like, wait, I thought they wanted more. I thought they wanted to play the younger kids. This fourth line of Foligno, Nosek, and by the way, Foligno was playing on Thursday with Bergeron and DeBrusk.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of youth movement going on here. I mean, maybe they meant like Trent Frederick, but I don't understand, because that seemed like an easy one. And I think it also goes back to having these older veterans on the team like Nosek and Foligno, who make more money, would have to go through waivers, and kind of giving them the first shot at this, which again, I don't love, and again, like, maybe there is something with Foligno. We've talked about this, like maybe him being fully healthy with a new coach might do it, but I don't know if the signs really fully point that way. I think McLaughlin looked like a really good fit for that fourth line. So the only really young player has made it right now, at least it seems to have a spot, is Studnicka. That's the only like really young player. Because again, Frederick played all of last season with the team. And like, I don't really consider that to be a younger guy. I mean, he is a younger guy, but I don't put him in that same basket.
Yeah.
But Stanika is really the only guy. And I just off the top of my head, he wasn't in the four lines at practice, right?
No, he was
on
part
the
of
fifth.
him and Wagner were part of a kind of an extra grouping with Taylor Hall, who was in a non-contact sweater. So at this point, you're like, all right. And I understand like Thomas Nosek has value that's probably underrated in terms of, being good on the draws and a good penalty killer. But you just look at the way those guys both performed this year, and it kind of goes back to what have we said for the last couple of weeks in terms of Montgomery and what he's looking at for that fourth line with guys like Greer and McLaughlin and Stanika and generating a lot of energy. Like it was kind of right there, right? And all of a sudden now we're going to a spot where it's guys like Frederick on the fourth line, who again has more of a ceiling or more to give. But between that and Nosek, Jakub Lauko, who made the cut, which I kind of find surprising because I don't believe he's needs to be, go through waivers, even though he's a bit of an older player. So the fact that he made it over a guy like McLaughlin's kind of surprising in that regard. It's kind of like you're just back to the same old, not the same set unit on that fourth line, but you look at like the potential and the ceiling of what you got from Greer, Stanika, and McLaughlin compared to where it is right now. Again, just one practice on Thursday. It could be completely jumbled around again on Friday, but you kind of just look at where that promise was just a few days ago. It's like, all right, I understand you're still kind of mixing and matching, but in terms of, reaching that higher ceiling, I think a lot of Bruins fans probably feel a lot better, or at least are a lot more intrigued by what you get from those, aforementioned guys that have a little bit more to give, I think, offensively, especially.
Again, I think a fourth line of, as we said, like a Greer or even a Frederick plus McLaughlin on the right and Stanika down the middle, or even Beecher. I know it's not a bad thing for him to go to Providence, but even a guy like Beecher, like I just think it would have been more intriguing. And I think the ceiling is so much higher. As you said, like Nosek provides value, but you know what you're getting. That's exactly what you're getting. And again, it's just kind of money not well spent when you look back at that offseason 2 years ago now, where it's like, now would be a pretty good time to kind of use those younger guys on that fourth line. And you're just not getting it. You're not getting it at all. Lauko is an interesting one too, by the way, because I feel like I haven't heard his name much at all throughout training camp. And I guess he's quietly impressed. It also goes back to, remember those comments we made when the Bruins first hired Montgomery, the comments he made in Dallas about how he formats each line where everyone kind of serves a purpose. Maybe it's that, like, maybe it's like, hey, we need a speedy, guy to go on the right side who's a left shot. Like maybe we need him on the fourth line. I don't know. It's an interesting case because I don't know if that's something that I know there was, with Lauko a few years ago, people were kind of saying, hey, maybe he could be a potential like top six winger down the road. Feels like that hasn't been what's happened. But interesting case. I just can't believe the McLaughlin stuff. I thought he was almost a lock at this point.
Yeah, I would just say the one thing to end this discourse with is the fact that one thing I think we've drilled home quite a bit already is that this fourth line, how it's going to start, I'm going to put down a half the amount of money. It's going to look drastically different by the time we get to, March and April. I
actually have one more thing to add to the conversation we were just having, and it's about Stanika. And I texted you this on Thursday. It's a little bit of a hot take. I must admit, I was actually at the bar. I was at the barber shop waiting at my haircut. And I was like just thinking through different things in my head, would be good line combinations. Because everyone's coming out with their line projections. And I'm like, you know what? I think I need to come out with mine. I need to fit in. And
it's fair.
And it's a little bit hot. It's a little bit of a hot take. But I'll be honest. I think with DeBrusk and Bergeron, I think most people really would not want to see Foligno there. I think that's like a pretty common thing among people. I understand why they're doing it, but I don't think it's the right move, short or long term. Stanika. What about Stanika? Give him a shot. I know. I think he'd rather be down the middle. I think he's better down the middle, but he's played well enough in the preseason. Give him a shot. New coach. Like, I think he's earned the ability to fill in on that line, and then potentially go down to the fourth line as a center or something like that. But give him a shot. Like I to start the season, as you said, the fourth line is not going to be the same, throughout the season most likely. I wouldn't expect Stanika to stay up there, but I just like to see it with Bergeron. Bergeron and DeBrusk with a new coach. I'd like that better than like putting Craig Smith up there or Nick Foligno or people like, I don't know. And keeping the Czechs mix line together. So again, it won't happen most likely unless something happens, but I'm disappointed that they didn't go that route. Cause again, I think we both haven't been super high on Stanika, but I think we both liked what we saw out of him in the preseason, and just given the injuries, I wouldn't hate him on the right side there. So
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
Interesting case.
Either that or even like, again, I know you said you don't really like Smith, but I think that one, again, if you're looking at just
it makes the most sense. In
terms of overall potential, at least ceiling, I'll take that over, DeBrusk, Bergeron, Smith over, as you said, Foligno, Bergeron, DeBrusk in terms of just higher offensive ceiling. And again, that seems to be someone who fits more into their plans this year with Smith as opposed to someone like Foligno. And if it gets a guy like Smith rolling, we've already known during his 2 years here that he's a bit of a streaky scorer. So if you get him rolling early on and eventually goes back down to his usual spot with Coyle and he's a bit more consistent and bringing you a little bit more secondary scoring, seems to be a move that should benefit all parties, at least to open up the year.
And this segues great into our fun segment, 2 questions that determined Bruins' success this year. We said that we would do a kind of a soft preview of the season on Poke the Bear today. And this is how we're doing it, along with X factors. And, is this team actually a cup contender? But we'll start with 2 questions, each of us. So 4 questions in total. And I will let you go first. What is your first question that determines Bruins' success this season?
Yeah, I think it all come down to, at least in terms of setting the tone, it's just how this team can stay afloat in October and November. I mean, you look at, I think they've got good news in terms of both. I don't think Taylor Hall is going to miss an extended amount of time, even though I also wouldn't necessarily rush him back. But it doesn't seem like it's going to be a weeks long absence like they feared it might have been. And then Matt Grzelcyk's a guy that Jim Montgomery already said could be back in a full contact sweater pretty soon, which I don't think he's going to be good to go for the start of the season, but if it's now the 3rd week of October, the end of October, that's still a week or so ahead of schedule for him as well. And he's a guy that in Montgomery's system, you have to imagine could make quite the impact in terms of just buying into that system and having more active offensive contributors on the blue line. But still, it's tough to account for the loss of a guy like Charlie McAvoy and Brad Marchand and what they bring to this team. So it will be tough sledding in the early going. Not only you don't have guys that can replace those kind of franchise stars in the lineup, but also the fact that you're also going to be juggling through that lineup. As we said, we don't really know what exactly that bottom 6 is going to look like. Is Foligno going to be on the top line? Is it Smith? What have you? They're going to be a lot of mixing and matching to start the year. So again, people look at that Thanksgiving kind of threshold as the barometer if you're going to make the playoffs or not. I would say don't panic if the Bruins are 11-9-4 or something around that time. Like, I think as long as they don't completely bottom out during that stretch, they should be fine. Because this is, I think, a team that's looking at the big picture, getting healthy and going on a second half run, especially. But in terms of just setting the tone, you still don't want to be all of a sudden looking at the standings and seeing these other teams ahead of you by, 6-7 games or what have you, or by a sizable amount of points. You just don't want to get off to a rough start. And I think for the Bruins, it's going to be a lot of treading water and mixing and matching the lineup to start the year.
And I think for Bruins fans, I think if your team is better than 11-9-4 and is, cruising, and it's November 26th and Marchand's coming back and McAvoy is, on his way back, and you're in the 2nd or 3rd spot in the Atlantic, you have a real shot at the Stanley Cup. It's no joke like that. And by the way, I don't know if that's going to happen, obviously. And I'm getting way ahead of myself, but I feel like we're setting the bar kind of low almost for them treading water. Whereas they could potentially easily top it if everything goes right. But My question comes down to, or one of my questions is, what does Brad Marchand look like when he comes back? Now, again, I expect him to be good. I expect him to be impactful. Is he at an MVP caliber level? I don't quite know. Cause again, he doesn't have really a training camp. He'll have on ice sessions and he'll be out there for practice and non-contact jerseys and things. But he's a 34-year-old coming off hip surgery. And if you think about that, again, still going to be really good, most likely. But again, you do have to kind of consider the circumstances here. And again, most likely he comes back with Bergeron and they pick right up where they left off. And, on the right side there, you'll have DeBrusk or whoever it is at that time, most likely, hopefully, if all goes well, DeBrusk. But it's something to think about, something to watch, because again, 34 years old, hip surgery, never an easy thing. And I think he is such a key cog in this offense, and there's so much reliant on him at all times, even though you have guys like Taylor Hall and Bergeron and Pastrnak. I just think penalty killing, power play minutes, just goals and assists in general. I think so much just falls on him, and he's such a part of that core that I think if he came back and he wasn't the same, that's an issue. That's worrisome. So he is someone I absolutely, that's one of my biggest questions. And I feel like we haven't talked about him much solely because he's just not in the fold right now. But he's been out at practice. So right? Like he hasn't been. Like,
he's been skating. He's not been
not
part
practice,
of
skating.
Like full,
skating,
part of full group yet or anything like that. But he's been out there pretty consistently. So he's back on the ice and getting back up to speed. But even he discussed that with us at the golf tournament a few weeks ago. That for him, he said it almost feels like he's learning how to skate all over again, which is not great. Makes sense considering like the amount of work that had to get done. I mean, it's a double hip surgery as well. So I agree that I think it'd be unrealistic to expect him to be a guy that goes right back in there and is playing at a 90-point pace or something like that, right away. But still, that being said, like the Bruins at least have added depth that even a Marchand at 80% of what they expect can still be a very good top six winger, but they will obviously would rather him be the same player he was. I just don't know if it's important to maybe temper expectations or just expect it to be a slight dip when you factor in, the severity of the offseason surgery plus his age. Sooner or later you have to put two and two together. And we always talk about Marchand's a guy that's usually defied those expectations in terms of surgeries or playing through pain. But again, Father Time's usually undefeated. And when you add this surgery on top of it, it's only natural, I think, to at least set expectations for there to be a slight dip in terms of what you're expecting from him this year.
Yeah, and again, he's not the only guy on offense, as I said. So I think if there is a dip, I don't think this team's cup chances are ruined, but it doesn't help. It doesn't help. What is your second question?
Yeah, I think one, lineup situation that needs to be kind of sorted out, and I don't think they're going to get a clear answer early on, but I think when you look at when guys are healthy, even with Marchand's, let's say he's at 80%, put him with Bergeron, who's still playing at a high level, and DeBrusk, who played at a 35 goal pace last year, they should be fine. They'll still be a damn good line. I think you look at Hall, Krejci, Pastrnak. I think Bruins fans saw firsthand what that line can do. Even Sands, Taylor Hall, with how they performed against the Rangers. I think that line's going to rip up a lot of very good defenses, especially as the year goes on. I don't think once the guys are healthy, you have to really worry that much about that top six. That third line, though, that's one that you need to, find out where the pieces fit, who the best options there, and if they can get just consistent production. Again, I don't think you need Charlie Coyle, Zacha, Craig Smith, Lysell, if he fits into the equation, McLaughlin, whoever it ends up being. I don't think you need all of them to have career years where they each have 60 plus points or what have you, but if they can be a grouping that gives you just consistent production, or at least gives you what to expect from them. It doesn't have to be career years in terms of point production, but if they're possessing the puck, they're making it tough to play against, if they're exploiting matchups. What have we talked about in years past has been the biggest thing that's kind of doomed this team in previous playoff run? It's the lack of consistent secondary scoring, right? So
we've talked about this before. I
know it's hard to believe that we keep on bringing it back up, but it's something where I think at the very least Montgomery and the Bruins have a bevy of options when it comes to Coyle, Frederick, Zacha, as we said, all these guys that offer a potential. It's not like there are a bunch of Joe Schmoes out there, or unproven players. These guys all have talent. They have all skill sets that should really work for this lineup, especially further down in there. It's just about finding the right pieces that fit, and hopefully guys that can just, even if it's 5% getting better from what they were last year, which maybe you get out of Montgomery's system, that extra 5% incrementally could make a world of a difference for this team in terms of getting just that added production further down in the lineup.
So this is kind of why I didn't want Craig Smith on the first line, is that I would love to just kind of let him cook with Coyle to begin the year on that third line and let them, I know they have chemistry, but let it develop under a new coach. Same with, leaving a guy like Greer down there. Like let them build something. Cause as you said, it's such a question mark of building that good third line. I feel like every Stanley Cup champ has a terrific third line that we talk about this every postseason. Where is the line mismatch? Like where can you gain an advantage? And for years, Coyle has made sense as a guy who can lead a line that is a complete mismatch. And for a couple of years now, it's been like, well, it hasn't really happened. And I think that's, as you said, it's such an important thing. And By the way, a line of Zacha, Coyle, Smith, we've said this all off season, it is a lot of teams probably second lines. Like that's a very good third line. And by the way, if AJ Greer works on that third line, which at least from practice on Thursday, like he was there, and you move him down to the fourth line when Marchand returns and kind of everybody moves down a bit, like AJ Greer on your fourth line now. So to me, the third line is such a question mark, but I think it's not a question mark in a bad way because there are a lot of candidates for it. You just have to find the right trio. And as happened in 2019, it doesn't have to happen in the first few months. This team's success in the regular season is not fully dependent on the third line. You can take a few months to kind of figure out what's the best grouping. But just by like March, you should have an idea of, all right, this is our third line. Feels like not that he's out of the rotation, but I think Frederick probably won't be getting looks there once once Marchand comes back, because it feels like Zacha makes the most sense for that line, unless Frederick thrives. Who knows? My second question has to do on D. Who's the odd man out? Who's the odd man out when Matt Grzelcyk returns and Charlie McAvoy returns? Because now you most likely have Strawman added to this mix as well. Again, they moved Connor Carrick through waivers down to Providence. You got most likely Strawman signed, at least it feels like, which is given Montgomery's comments and given, his age and experience. So again, who's the odd man out? Is it Strawman, Riley, Zboril, Clifton, Forbert? I mean, it's funny, like Riley's looked terrific in this preseason, had that really nice goal the other night. It's like, if that keeps up, like you can't keep him out of the lineup. Like Grzelcyk's probably a better puck mover, but if Riley keeps performing at this level, I mean, you just can't move him out of there. Forbert obviously plays a certain role. No one else can really do it. Someone on Twitter, though, replied to me Wednesday night and said, could Strawman potentially like take Forbert's minutes? And it's hard to compare them because, again, Forbert's younger and, Strawman came in on a PTO. We have yet to see Strawman in the regular season with the Bruins. But again, I think there are so many guys who have shots in the lineup and you can't play them all. So I'm very curious to see who the odd man out or odd men out are and what they do with them. Again, do you just keep them on level 9? Like, I mean, do you get Mike Riley to a point where he's producing a bunch and you deal him for what though? So that's the other thing is like, and we talked about this before, like what does Mike Riley get you? Do you really want to be trading for, I mean, you need picks down the road, but do you want to be trading for picks on a team that's supposed to be contending for a cup? I don't know. Interesting conundrum they have over there. But again, not a terrible problem. Not a horrible. You have a lot of viable top, viable defensemen here. That's not a horrible thing. So, anyways, X factors. Always fun to talk about X factors. Conor, what is your X factor for this team?
Yeah, I guess I'm going to go with two guys as the X factors, but I think when you look at the one,
they're really one
area.
person.
Yeah, it's pretty much. Yeah, if you look at just the one area of the roster where, again, you look at the forwards, you have to figure out how that bottom 6 pans out, but you've got probably the best top 6 personnel once healthy this team's had in years. Defense, as you said, needed guys to get healthy there, but that's a personnel grouping that you can mix and match to kind of make whatever you want of it, right? Like if Jim Montgomery wants to go wild and have Riley and Grzelcyk both in the lineup together and have just this up-tempo, crazy, offensively minded decor, they absolutely can do that. Or you can keep Forbert and Strawman. Like you can mix and match that. Once everyone's back there and you have the bodies in place, you can do a whole lot with that grouping. And you add in the fact they're still keeping that pretty stingy zone defense. I think the defense is going to be fine. The one thing that I think is going to, be the factor that pushes them past other very tough teams in the playoffs is going to be what you're going to get out of your goalies. And it's, whether can Jeremy Swayman take another step forward in his development. He had a strong, rookie season, but can he make that next step? Not just, let's say that he's going to be a Vezina, contender or anything like that. I don't think it's reasonable to expect that, but can he just take another step forward? And the same with Omar, who, had his ups and downs, but as a whole was pretty consistent for this team, adjusted to, a new market, a new team here, and did pretty well, really build up the team during some of the tougher stretches they had last season. So if both those guys together in place for a full season now, without the distractions of, Tuukka Rask, weighing over them or what have you, if they can both perform at a high level and support the already kind of established strengths you have here. Again, that's what it usually comes down to in the playoffs. Every team can win because every team's really freaking good. What gets you over the top sometimes is just how your goaltending is doing at that particular juncture of the season. And if both Swayman and Ullmark are playing at a high level, regardless of who's in net, that might be the one thing that ultimately pushes them past a whole bunch of other very, very good teams in the East.
I'm also curious, like how because last year they were even. They were pretty even. I mean, one led in goals against, one led in save percentage, and it was very close. It was not far apart. And I'm just wondering, like, throughout the season, does one pull away? Like, and by the way, should you be concerned if Swayman is the one who pulls away? Because then Ullmark seems kind of not to be mean, but like a waste of money almost. And if Ullmark's one that pulls away, are you worried that, Swayman isn't developing? So I think there's a good chance that one could maybe outplay the other. And also in the playoffs, like, do you really want to be playing both? I know that they want to be rested and things like that, but no team in the NHL has truthfully gone back and forth in the postseason and had it work yet. So I think going into a last dance scenario, I think this coaching staff would probably enjoy having, okay, Swayman's our starter, Ullmark's our starter. Like, I don't think they want to be going back and forth throughout a series. And again, who knows, again, like during series, they might have to, switch, like that happens. But I think consistently switching back and forth probably isn't the best recipe for success. But again, we'll see how the season plays out with both of these guys. My X factor, because I agree, goaltending is a huge X factor. Who you play on D is a huge X factor. Your third and fourth lines, big X factors. But I think the one thing this team does not want to have to do at the deadline is go out and get a top six winger. And I think it really hinges on Jake DeBrusk. Is Jake DeBrusk going to continue to build on his game from the second half of last season where he was really good? Now, all signs, by the way, point to that happening, right? Like full season on the first line with Bergeron and Marchand when he comes back. New head coach, seems kind of, revitalized and all those things, has the contract extension. But I just think if he doesn't work out there, maybe you try Zacha. But again, I don't know if those are any full-time. It's not really a full-time thing. I mean, if you're really going for a cup, you need a solid guy up there. And DeBrusk can do that. Like, DeBrusk has proven in his career he can score a lot of goals. It just comes down to, can he be consistent enough to do so? And I think if this team is going into the deadline and they're like, well, we're going to have to probably give up a first-round pick for a top six winger, like, that's a huge problem. That is not where you want to be. And by the way, and I've said this, I think, to you before, they don't really have a hole right now. Like, there's no hole in this lineup where I say, oh, they need to add that at the deadline. Like I feel like last year it was top four left shot defenseman. Year before it was they need a top six winger. You don't want the top six winger to be a problem again.
Right.
And I just think that that's a huge thing because, again, that's giving up a first. Whereas right now, I mean, do you foresee an area where they're going to need to bolster at the deadline? I can't really think of one.
Yeah, you would feel like it'd be more just added, depth or just a different piece a different piece further down the lineup. Like, is it getting a physical presence on the fourth line or something? I feel like it's something like that where it has to be a compliment. It shouldn't be at least another one.
Chris Kelly or Rich Peverly.
Yeah, it shouldn't be like a guy that's going to, a 40-point guy that you need to shore up your third line or anything like that. And if that's the case, you're in trouble because, again, you can't keep on, even though the pressure's on, you're trying to win now with however long you have this core still in place. It might just be for this year. You have to stop, moving first round picks. Like, the market's only going to get crazier and crazier in terms of, the amount of the asking price that teams are going for.
Did you hear that plane go over?
I did not.
Oh my God. It is so, I feel like it's like buzzing the top of my house. My God, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but my goodness.
That is okay.
The listeners were like, is Evan in a war zone? Like,
I did not hear anything. So thankfully it seems like everything's okay. I was
safe.
Very concerned for a moment there. That was just a very odd guerrilla marketing campaign for something too. But no, I think that's what it has to be, is like a missing piece, another contributor to build an identity maybe further down the lineup. It shouldn't be a thing we have to trade another first round pick to add to this core. At least that shouldn't be the case. And if so, you're only going to further make it a steeper kind of uphill climb when eventually you're building for the future and you have to kind of surround yourself with a new supporting cast.
My God, if they go into next draft and they don't have a first round pick, like, what on earth? And I think, great. And again, they shouldn't have to deal one. This roster is deep. you have lots of defensemen. You have a legit top left shot, top right shot. You have two good goalies. You have depth on the with forwards. You have guys like Zacha who could be in the top six. Like you have Fabian Lysell in the farm system. So like shouldn't have to give up the first round pick. Hopefully that they don't end up having to do that. Now the big question: does this team have realistic cup hopes?
I think so. We've kind of talked about this before. Are they at the same tier as Colorado or someone like that? I don't think so. But I also think people need to look at this team and realize that it's still a very, very good roster, especially once guys get healthy. Like, again, top six looks really, really good once everyone's good to go. I think people caught on a little bit watching that game. You saw a lot of very excited Bruins fans on the timeline after the Rangers game. It's like, oh shit, like this second line could be really good. Like, yeah, it's you replace Eric Halla and add in David Krejci. It tends to help you out quite a bit there.
Crazy how that works.
You look at the added boost that should come from Montgomery and just the natural kind of lift that provides of having a new voice behind the bench, the systems he has in place, the defense responding, as we said before, the amount of personnel the Bruins have that can kind of augment what you want out of that decor. The expectation of guys like DeBrusk building off of last year, a young goalie like Swayman taking another step forward. Like there's pieces in place that you don't have to set unrealistic, thresholds or unrealistic expectations in terms of what the supporting cast needs to do around guys to expect this team to be good, right? Like, it's not like, well, they need DeBrusk to score 45 goals. It's like, no, but he can score 30 and that'd be a lot better than what it was last year. Like Swayman doesn't have to win the Vezina, but he can take another step forward and it looked pretty good. Like, I just think when you look at how this team is built, it's the same core in place, but with, I think, more depth around it and more, support around kind of the pieces that have driven this contention window for so long. You factor in, we talked about it during Bruins beat, but the fact that the Atlantic's going to be tough. The rest of the East is going to be tough. The whole rest of the NHL is tough, but I think people are also overlooking, I think, just where the Bruins fit in that equation, whether it's you look at Toronto and what their goaltending situation is, which holy shit, Florida with, their defense behind Ekblad, which is rather barren. Even Tampa Bay, which I think they'll still be in the mix. It's still Tampa. They still got Vasilevsky, still have that core. But again, the talent drain continues there in terms of further down in that lineup. Like, I'm not going to say that the Bruins are like going to go scorched earth on everyone, but I don't find it like you see a lot of people be like, this Bruins team is going to be pretty good and they're going to be right in the mix. And people like, pushing back on that thing. It's not a hot take to be like, this Bruins team is going to be pretty good. And again, as we've said time and time again, if you're in the mix, sometimes that's all you need to go on a deep run. I think this Bruins team's in position, health-wise, pending on health, I guess, to go on a deep run for what, again, could be kind of that last dance with this core.
What was the biggest reason David Krejci came back? Or one of the biggest, to win another cup. They believe this team could do it. And I mean, as you said, you look at the roster and it makes sense. You have two good goalies. You have a backup plan for Jeremy Swayman. You have tons of defensemen. You have lots of depth. If they kept all these defensemen, I don't know how you do it with the cap, but if they kept even most, if two of them go down in the postseason, you have ones that can step right in and fill in and really not miss a beat. Up front, same type of thing. So again, the roster is there. You have a new head coach, a new yes, I think that they should have cup hopefuls. Like, they should be in the mix. I think if they're out in the first round, that is a huge disappointment.
Yes.
That is a complete miss. And again, even, like getting past the second round, like they have what it takes to come out of the Atlantic. We've said this, like top to bottom, they might be the most complete team in the Atlantic. Not to say they're the best, but they're the most complete. All those other teams have question marks. The Bruins really don't have it. It's more like, can you just get past the second round? Which seems to be the thing. And again, I think Montgomery's a good coach. So like you have that going for you too. So cup hopefuls for sure. Lots of, not huge questions. I mean, even the questions that determine Bruins success, even the four that we gave, it's not completely hinging on that, Is the best player still going to be good after double hip surgery? Well, even if he dips a little bit, it's not going to derail the team. So anyways, lots of expectations, but Conor, what can people look forward to from you over at Boston Sports Journal?
Yeah, we're going to continue to, we have a whole bunch of preview content set to roll out in the next couple of days, whether it be, questions surrounding the Bruins, predictions, which are always hysterical to look back on, which I'm sure we will do a couple of times this year.
Many times.
Reactions from, I think, Media Day will be on Monday. And again, I'll be down in Washington, D.C. for the season opener. So we'll have all coverage, boots on the ground. For that as well. So please subscribe at bostonsportsjournal.com. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at ConorRyan_93.
Go do all that. That's Conor Ryan, Evan Marinofsky. You Poke the Bear listeners. Have a great rest of your day.